Public Safety Committee will please come to order. Madam Clerk, if you will show that the committee is in attendance, Mr. Taylor, Ms. Herbert, and Mr. Duval. We're going to take up the resolution as our first item, requesting that security cameras be at the entrances and exits of nursing homes. And we're not going to vote on this resolution, but we're going to send it back to the City Council for the City Council to act on it. This is a result of a person that was on the Central Midlands Council of Government, mother, I believe, walking away from a nursing home, and he wants legislation to require these cameras, and the COG asked the different governmental agencies in the COG to pass resolutions in support. I understand that Lexington County, the city of Lexington, and Richland County have passed these resolutions, and we will send this back to the Columbia City Council on our next agenda to take an action probably in support of this.
Mr. Chairman, if you would, let me be on the record as recusing myself from the discussion on this. I also have some ownership positions in some assisted living centers and stuff.
So noted.
And I've recused myself because I sue some of these facilities.
Also,
And I don't want to.
so noted. So we will not vote on this, and the chairman will refer it back to the full council. One of the things we have on our agenda today is to talk about the increased oversight of the bail bond industry. Councilman Taylor asked us to take this up in support of Governor McMaster's comments that were recently in the newspaper asking that the bail bond industry be tightened up and to give us better control over people getting out on bail. I've asked Judge Mangum, who's our chief judge for the City of Columbia, to come to the meeting to answer our questions. And Judge Mangum, if you'll go to the microphone so people can hear you, we will ask you a couple of questions that might shed some light on the bail bond industry. First, Judge Mangum, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And can you tell us in a couple of minutes the authority of the judges at the municipal level for setting a bail?
Sure. We set bail by state statute, and there's several statutes that we rely on. I have to apologize because I was not under the impression that I was going to be necessarily speaking today. So I may not have all the information that you want. If there are specific questions that I don't answer today, or that you have follow-up questions for, I would appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
So in terms of our state statutes, the state statutes inform judges in the municipal court in terms of what bonds we can set. So we cannot set bonds on capital offenses, which are things like murder, CSC with a minor. There's 3 or 4 of those offenses. Those automatically go to the circuit court for the circuit court to set. We also municipal court judges cannot set bonds on a defendant who is already on bond for a violent crime and then commits another violent crime. That bond also automatically goes to the circuit court. Whatever's left is within the purview of the municipal court judges in terms of setting bonds for crimes that occur within the City of Columbia.
Judge, the amount of the bond, is that something within your purview on those cases that you can set a bond? Is the amount set by law, or is that an option for the judge?
The amount is not set by law. There is some guidance in our state statutes in terms of what bonds are appropriate. The presumption, and under our state statutes, is for not for nonviolent offenses. The presumption is a PR bond. The bond court judge is tasked with 2 specific questions by statute. That is whether the defendant is a flight risk or whether he's a danger to the community. Those are the 2 things that the judge considers in determining what, if any, bond is appropriate. On a violent crime that's before a municipal court judge, again, that's the first violent crime, would not be a subsequent. But on a first violent crime before the municipal court judge, the judge has the option by statute of setting bond or denying bond. On any nonviolent offense, the judge is required by statute to set a bond.
And there's nothing to say how much that bond is, that's the discretion of the judge?
That is at the discretion of the judge, yes.
Questions?
I do have a follow-up question. If the municipal judge decides not to set a bond on a violent crime, does that person automatically get the opportunity to have bond set in circuit court, or are you all at the end of it?
There's an opportunity to file a motion to reconsider bond. That would be heard at the circuit court, and the circuit court judge would determine whether or not a bond was appropriate.
Okay, so reconsideration doesn't come back to the original
Does
judge?
not come back to, we lose jurisdiction once we set that bond on a general sessions level offense. Our only involvement is that initial bond setting.
Okay.
And then a preliminary hearing if that comes in the future. We also hear those.
Judge Mangum, I mean, when setting bond, it's discretionary to the judge on nonviolent events for whether to be a cash bond or a PR bond?
The presumption from our state statute is that it's a PR bond, absent a finding that the defendant is a flight risk or a danger to the community.
And can you give some examples of what those types of charges would be, for those who may not know?
In terms of, I'm sorry,
Say that.
Can you give some examples of what the nonviolent charges would be that would normally have a PR bond?
so violent and nonviolent crimes are decided by statute, not by judges. There's a statute that lists all the violent crimes in the state of South Carolina. That's 16160. So if it's not listed in that statute, it is a nonviolent crime in South Carolina. I'm hesitant to ever give examples about what may or may not be a PR bond because it is very case specific, and it depends on the defendant. It depends on the defendant's prior history. It depends on, we ask a series of questions from every defendant that comes before us. Things like, do you work? Where do you work? Where do you live? How long have you lived there? We're looking for things like, have you ever failed to appear at a prior court hearing? We look at a prior criminal history. We look at statements from law enforcement. So all of those things come into play when determining whether a PR bond would be appropriate.
And just for my edification, what is the statute that distinguishes the violent and nonviolent?
The violent statute is 16-1-60. That's the list of all violent crimes in South Carolina.
Okay, and there's not one that lists nonviolent?
No. It would just be everything not on that list.
Again, question, I want to make sure I understood you correctly. If it's only if it's on a when you said a minute ago, when somebody is out on bond and they're arrested again, it's only if it's a violent crime they're out on that it goes to circuit court?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so like on homeless situations or urban camping and things like that where we have repeat offenders that you're out on bond for one, get arrested again. I mean, do we, if somebody's, I guess what I want to ask is, if on a misdemeanor or whatever you would call them, because I'm not a lawyer, if somebody's out on bond and they're back in jail, do we tend to do a PR bond or a cash bond on the second time?
Again, it would be case specific. It would depend on the situation that's before the judge.
Okay, let me ask it a different way.
Sure.
What percentage of those do you think are generally PR bonds?
What percentage of what
Somebody's
charges?
somebody is out on a bond for another nonviolent charge and arrested again, and bond set by the judge, just as a guesstimate percentage. I mean, how many are cash bonds? How many are PR bonds?
I couldn't tell you. I'd have to, I did provide some statistics, I think, before. I don't have those in front of me.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look at those statistics. I don't know those off the top of my head.
If I look at our accounting and I see, and again, this is, I really just trying to get an understanding. If I look at our accounting, forfeitures and fines. Forfeitures would be the forfeiture of bond for not showing up to court. Is that correct, Ms. Wilson? Do you know? Nobody?
No, I
Forfeiture would be somebody that pays their ticket without coming to court,
Okay, then that,
or their warrant, their fine if it's a warrant. Somebody that pays without contesting their charge.
do we have any feel for how many people are, again, you may not have the statistics and you may want to look and get back to us. Do we have any feel for the statistics of how many people are set with misdemeanor PR bonds that don't show back up for their court date?
I don't. By statute and by court procedure, when somebody does not appear for their court date and they have been issued a bond, then a bench warrant is issued for their arrest. So that's the remedy for the municipal court in terms of somebody who fails to appear from a misdemeanor charge that went through bond court and then fails to appear.
Tina, do you have a question?
Not at the moment.
I guess back to on the bail bond question, I mean, how often do we run into bail bond situations in our municipal court system? Hardly at all, or?
How many bonds are issued that
No,
require?
I just don't, I mean, I don't have quite an understanding on the level of bonds, dollar amounts. I mean, do bail bondsmen, they don't get involved on a cash bond, it's $200 or $300, or do they?
I've never seen a cash bond for $200 or $300. I can't tell you that wouldn't exist, but I don't know of any. I've not set a bond for $200 or $300, and I don't know of any of our judges that have done that. I can't. I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but that would be
What are the
unusual.
typical bond levels that we see in municipal court?
Typically, if we're typically going to do it depends on the fine amount. I mean, that's the easiest answer. It depends on the fine
Range,
amount.
high to low.
So we do have some fines as low as $250, $250, and then go all the way up to over $5,000.
And so are you saying that the bond that you will set will be compatible with whatever the fine is for that particular charge?
Yes.
You see, so if the fine, if they're found guilty and the fine is $1,000, then typically the bond would be $1,000.
Right.
A PR bond or a cash bond for $1,000.
PR is no money.
PR is a personal recognizance, so there wouldn't be. I mean,
That's no money.
So the only time you would set a cash amount for bond would be if you were setting a cash bond and not a PR bond.
we typically don't set just a cash bond. We set cash or surety, and so that would typically be the option. It's either a PR or it's a cash or surety. Now, certainly there are situations before judges where they do issue a cash-only bond.
What's a cash or surety?
Cash is the
I know what
defendant has
cash
to.
is, what's the surety part?
Surety is when you get the bail bondsman involved.
That's what I'm saying, how often do you see that very often in
It happens every day.
municipal court?
Yeah. I would say that's our primary, that's the primary bond that's issued by judges. Because remember, we're hearing all of the cases, all of the charges that come up in the city of Columbia. So some are misdemeanors, but we're hearing all the felonies as well, absent the ones that meet that very specific guidelines that I talked about.
And then if the defendant doesn't show up for court and they have a bond that's been funded by a bail bondsman, you're issuing a bench warrant, then what happens?
We are hoping that the defendant gets picked up on that bench warrant.
What happens to the bond, though, that was put up by the?
That's a very interesting question because there is a procedure in circuit court for those bonds to be estreated through the solicitor's office. The city doesn't have a procedure in terms of bond estreatment. I have reached out to court administration to try to work with them to see if there's a better way for us to estreat bonds.
Wait, excuse me now, estreat means?
Estreat means would be to hold the bondsman accountable when the defendant fails to appear on a city-level charge.
Is that a statutory
It is.
limitation of the city, or is that something that we could institute as a city?
It is derived by state statute. It's my understanding that the municipal court has not ever in the past estreated bonds, and it is my understanding also that it is typically in general sessions, it's done through the solicitor's office. So that's part of what we would have to work through is to figure out how that process
I guess
would
what I'm
work.
saying is, do we have the ability to do that as a city of Columbia, or is it prohibited by state statute?
We have, under the state statute, there is a process for estreating bonds. How that
For
process.
municipal government?
The state statute doesn't specify. The state statute talks about the attorney general, the solicitor. But certainly, there should be a process for us to be able to do that. I think the question is whether or not that escheatment is a civil action, and if it is, then municipal court doesn't have jurisdiction. That's the issue that I've reached out to court administration to try to get some.
I do see that the Municipal Association has published something on that, so I'm gonna forward it to you all.
And I have read that and also read the bench book. That's why I've reached out to court administration to ask for some guidance in terms of how we would handle that in the municipal court. Because we do not have civil jurisdiction.
Any other questions of the judge? Oh, Judge Mangum, thank you for answering our question. Tina, you've got a question?
Just something simple, because I really wanted to be able to give folks who may not know an example. I'm pretty sure loitering would be something that you could give a PR bond on.
Sure. I mean, we could give a PR bond on essentially any nonviolent.
Right. I'm going back to what you said earlier about statutorily, there's certain ones that you lean towards just doing a PR bond naturally. Loitering would be one of them.
Again, depending on the specific facts of the defendant that's before.
Those are the facts. Somebody was loitering. There are no extra facts.
If somebody appeared before me on a loitering charge with no prior criminal history, who had never been charged before, it is likely that person would get a PR bond on that charge with that set of facts.
There's one last question from me, I guess, Mr. Ball. And this is just general information question. Because knock on wood, I've not been before a bond judge in my life, at least yet. So how does it work? Does the solicitor's office send a prosecutor in there? Does the police officer make the case? Does the person stand there and you as a judge, you got to do both sides and make the case?
It used to be that the solicitor sent an assistant solicitor to bond court, but that has ended. That ended several years ago.
Did it end because of COVID or end before COVID?
I believe it was a choice Solicitor Gibson made, was to not send solicitors to bond court. That's my understanding.
Has
But
that had a negative impact on us? You don't have to answer that.
when a judge is and I would invite all of you to, bond court is open court just like every other court we have. I would invite you to come down and watch. But when we set bonds, there is a judge, a clerk, and however many defendants may happen to be in bond court that day. The judge is the only person in that courtroom who's making that decision, and they're making it based on the information that's before them.
The arresting officer is not there as well?
The arresting officer sometimes is there and sometimes not. Sometimes the officer sends a statement. Sometimes the officer informs the court about other information, but sometimes the officer's not there. And Chief Holbrook could speak better to that than I can about why or why not.
I was just curious, I mean.
I do have one follow-up question with regards to that. Do you feel that you have enough information at the time that you're setting the bond to set an appropriate bond?
I think every judge would like as much information as possible. They're hard decisions that you're making, and you're making them sometimes with very limited information. So more information would always be welcome.
Is there anything that we should look at as a municipal government with regard to bonding and bail bondsmen and the such that can make our city safer, make your job easier, make the police department's job easier that you can think of?
I'm not sure. I'm stepping, I think, a little bit out of my role as chief judge, but I certainly appreciated the things that the governor said in terms of bail bonds reforming, and the process that goes into that. I think escheatment is an avenue that the court should pursue, and we can work with the city attorney's office to figure that process out.
I did not realize we didn't have the streetlight deal. That's very eye-opening for me. And I do appreciate what the governor's doing too. I think it's very frustrating sometimes, and you know, we can all share in some of the responsibility that we read the stories in the paper where, you know, somebody's out on bond committing another thing. And I just think it's something that we just need to investigate and take a little bit more look. And any other suggestions that you may have and want to share, you know, we'd be welcome to hear them.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Manningham. We will not dig deeper into this subject this afternoon due to other things that we have on the agenda, but we will reserve the right to go back to it at a future time once we learn a little bit more about it and maybe give to Judge Manningham more than a day's notice to come back before us.
Mr. Duvall, I did want to note, I had to go back to my old City of Columbia days, and we previously had a panel on violent crime and bond reform. And so that may be something, if we want to do a deep dive, that may be a way to do it. Whether or not we can get those things done is a totally different thing, but
That was a panel discussion.
it was a committee, the mayor's panel on violent crime and bond reform. He had,
When was that?
this was in 2013. Robert Boches, our South Carolina Court Administration, Leon Lott, Carl Solomon, various people from various
We might want to
roles.
refresh that committee. All right, I've asked Chief Holbrook and Chief Jenkins to give us a 5-minute update on public safety. Chief Holbrook, would you like to lead off?
Thank you, Mr. Duvall. I'll start with just a year-to-date, quick at a glance on some crime numbers and just kind of work through some of our hot-button topics. Very similar to what I reported in some correspondence with you all recently. Our Part 1 crime is tracking very well. Year-to-date, our homicides are down 18%, rapes down 26%, robberies down 13%, burglary is down 13%, and auto breaking is down 22%. Our aggravated assaults, which is essentially our non-fatal shootings, is our Achilles heel. It's still tracking plus about 30%. As you know, last week we held our ceasefire call-in. We had 22 individuals that all had predicate offense convictions that subject them to federal prison if they get caught with a gun or ammunition. They were brought in as part of our ceasefire program, specifically to address breaking our shooting cycles that we see so much with our young adults in Columbia. Since May of 2021, we have invited over 90 individuals to participate in this program, and we've only had 16 reoffend. And let me tell you what that means. That's about a 17% recidivism rate. Nationally, the violent crime recidivism rate is over 70%. That is a huge success of an evidence-based program. We're very proud of that, and we that's really part of our DNA, and we'll continue to do that. So far this year, we've had 94 people shot. That's one less than we had all of last year, so we are tracking to have a record year of people hit by gunfire. And I would be, I think, remiss not to mention we've seen over 600 what is defined as mass shootings across our country. Tragically, most recently at the University of Virginia. We've had 2 in Columbia this year. We had the apartment shootings at Greens Crossing, and then we had the mall shootings. So those are some outliers that account for 15 people being shot, and certainly impacts our numbers. But we've also assisted the Sheriff's Department in several active shooting hoax calls at schools. Our preparedness, I think, has been evident with how we responded to the mall and then these school shootings that, thank God, turned out to be hoax. But I would also tell you that our staff, between our special operations group and emergency management with Director Tinsley, have trained over 1,000 people in our city this year in active intruder, active shooting response, and almost 200 City of Columbia employees. So we take our preparedness and training for that very, very seriously. We've seized 649 guns this year, and which is consistent for what we've reported the last several years. One thing that I would add, and I've mentioned this several times, if we look at our auto breakings, for example, which we are down 22%, but we've still had over 1,200 auto break-ins reported this year. And at least half of those would be unlocked vehicles, and probably a third of our stolen guns are reportedly come from unlocked vehicles. So we could, just from citizen responsibility, if we lock our cars, we could potentially knock our property crime rate down, double digits easily, and prevent guns falling into the wrong hands on the street, simply by locking a car and removing your firearm.
Chief, does the report that you get on an automobile break-in have secured and unsecured blocks
does.
on it?
Yes, sir.
So you can give us a statistic on those 1,200, how many were secured and how many are unsecured?
I can. Most of them are unsecured.
Right. I noticed that when I first started going to neighborhood meetings, the officers would come in and talk about break-ins, and I finally asked them, I said, how many of them were unlocked cars? Oh, most of them were unlocked cars. So I think we need to start using that statistic when we talk about automobile break-ins. I don't consider it a break-in if they leave the keys or the fob in the car.
We refer to them as let-ins. Yes.
Let-ins.
Let-ins. Another topic I would report out on would be our Pathways unit. We provided, our update 2 weeks ago, but since that time, we have obviously increased some of our contacts. We're at 500 arrests and field books. That's up 20 since we last reported that. We've conducted 505 field interviews and taken information reports, and we've rendered services to 225 persons. We currently have referred 415 clients and taken just shy of 900 actions for these identified clients. And since the Rapid Shelter has come online, we have introduced 15 people to the Rapid Shelter, and we continue to progress through the overflow with this inclement weather we've seen here lately, and working with staff at the Rapid Shelter. It's going fantastic, in my opinion. Just the expected logistic things that have come up just being online for a couple of weeks, but I have found the staff down there to be exceptional to work with, and we've just dealt with things as they've come our way. So it's working very well, in my opinion. The last thing, well, not the last thing, we often hear about traffic. I want to tell you that we average about 830 traffic citations a month. So far this year, we've issued over 8,300 tickets and a little over 2,000 for speeding. So enforcement is in effect. We've had over 6,400 collisions, and that's down about 4% from about 4.5% from this time last year. So we see some improvement. We hear that about a lot. I know you all hear it a lot from constituents as far as disregarding traffic signals, stop signs, and speed in general. And we're doing the very best we can to address that and remind people to slow down and stop appropriately. Last thing I would report on is our recruitment and retention efforts. 2 weeks ago, we officially brought online the hiring and retention initiative, our pay plan. As you can imagine, it was extremely well received. Thank you all for that. Ms. Wilson, thank you for your hard work with that. Ms. Benjamin and Ms. Javis's staff. It was a heavy lift. I mean, we literally have retooled everything from the ground up, tore it down and built it back up, and as you know, build in annual steps. Our officers can certainly plan for the future. There was a big investment in our vehicles. We now have a vehicle assigned to every eligible officer. That was a pie in the sky that we talked about a lot, and we've actually reached that. So as we continue to bring these new vehicles online that you all have generously supported the purchase of, we'll start rolling off some of our really high mileage vehicles and replacing them with the Tahoes that you're seeing, and that's going very well. The Tahoe is the vehicle of choice across our state, and we are in a long line of other municipalities that have also purchased hundreds and hundreds of vehicles, especially with recovery money. There's been a pretty significant effort statewide, and I think really throughout the country, to address fleet issues with agencies. So we've got our vendors very accommodating to us, but it's a process, and we certainly respect that. We are providing you all updates weekly with people we're onboarding. You saw 3 this past week and 1 from the week before. So in the last 2 weeks, we've onboarded 4. 1 from Philadelphia, 1 an NYPD officer who just left the agency in good standing, another one a certified South Carolina officer, so we'll hit the ground running quickly, and then another young man from Rochester, New York, who has been attending South Carolina State. So that we know we're getting some awareness up north, and we'll keep targeting that area for the mild temperatures and access to the mountains and the oceans. And of course, we think with our pay plan, it's very attractive for lateral transfers for certifieds. And as we continue to market our program and recruit, I've challenged all our officers to be a recruiter. If every person will recruit, 1 police officer, it'll solve our problem very quickly. We've got 9 in basic candidate school within the department right now, and 2 in the academy. And the way we do our BCS, we do it in groups, but really about every 4 weeks we're putting some into the academy, and that's a fluctuating number. We've also got 5 applications for our cadet program. That is a feeder program, and that is a way that we can, I believe, bolster local recruiting. Again, we want to reflect our community, but we also want to find people from our communities that we serve to be part of the rank and file. So we're very pleased about how things are tracking, and we're extremely grateful for the support and effort that has gone into helping us kind of reestablish staffing at the level that we all expect.
You had a target this year of 60 hires, is that?
40. Net 40.
Net 40. Okay. So you're well on the way of reaching those when?
We're not where we would like to be, but we think being 2 weeks into this, we're starting to track how we'd like. We know we've got a average 4 or 5 a week, so we've got our work cut out for us.
Real good. Thank you, Chief. That's an excellent report. Any questions?
I just wanted to add to, once we get through this season, Chief and I did have a meeting over at Allen University exploring some creative ways to bring folks in. But I am of the mindset that this is not the season to do it, but maybe for next academic year. So we'll bring that back.
Yes, ma'am. That was actually on my note. I missed it. Thank you. That we hope that intersects with our cadet program. It perfectly aligns with it. It's really just working the logistics out of how they can continue their studies, maybe be on our payroll in some part-time capacity, and again, moving them towards a career in law enforcement. But I think it's,
On this.
yeah.
Chief, I just have a couple of 3 basic questions just to kind of educate me on some things you mentioned too. Explain to me, why do we do traffic and the county doesn't? I just never have, always wondered that. You know, the highway patrol seems to take care of everything outside the city, but we have to do it in the city. And do they pay for the highway patrolman to do that? I'm just curious.
Or why the, why that nuance exists, that, it's not just in Richland County, it's in, other counties. Some do, respond to traffic accidents. I know you noted from the number, I say we spend a lot of time responding to crash reports, and, as we, continue to come up with innovative plans to improve efficiencies, one of the things that we are gonna have to look at is, how we respond to private property fender benders. That takes up a lot of time, and we respond to those, and how we respond and when we don't respond to false alarms. Those are two things that I think you all as a public safety committee can help us address and message with our citizens.
Okay, just so I understand though, on the traffic matters, it's just something that we've just always done that is it something that we should take a look at? I'm just curious. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just, I've always wondered why we handle that cost as a city and the county didn't have to handle it on their side,
I don't have an answer for you on that.
Well, it's traditionally a function of municipal police to respond to accidents. I think you'd find just about every municipal government that has a police department.
Colonel Williamson would stroke out if we announced today we were not responding to traffic accidents in the city of Columbia.
I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just trying to understand, again, why we carry some cost that other units of local governments don't have to carry. Because like I say, as we struggle, and we all struggle, to fill our openings for our most important law enforcement positions, again, when you look at the time we spend responding to traffic accidents, when others don't have to spend that time, I just wonder if it's something
It's significant. I mean, there's no question about it. It's significant, and any innovative things we can do to reduce that number, or how our response posture would be, I think would be beneficial for us to examine.
Second, on the rapid shelter system, our officers have a really good understanding. I'm delighted to hear you say it's working out really well. Let's just say it's, just so our friends that are over here and me all here, if there's somebody that's having an issue in 5 Points, it's after 5. Do we have a Pathways person that can go visit with them? Or if not, then there's a police officer that sees them. It used to be, let's just be candid, until Ms. Wilson and the city opened that 24/7 shelter, pretty much all your officers could do was tell that problem person, walk on, or I'll take you to jail. There really wasn't a third option.
That's true.
And we're finding that this third option is making a difference. At least I'm hearing that in the community today.
That's correct. So certainly a misdemeanor occurring in our presence, we do have an option to make a custodial arrest. Oftentimes, in the example you gave, we are responding to something after the fact, and that did not occur in our presence, and there is a level of frustration with obviously the business person or a citizen that's called about that disturbance. So now we do have an extra option. We can employ our ability to persuade to potentially get that individual to the pallet and remove them from causing that disturbance. And so our officers are very they're very abreast of that process, as is our Pathways. So Pathways are, when they're available, that's our first line of defense. But our officers, it is, it's been widely communicated. Everybody is tracking on the same page. And just what we've seen in the last 2 weeks, there is a really an equal ratio of referrals from Pathways and referrals from our line officers. So everybody recognizes the benefit of this. And, jail is still an option at times. And, but if we can get somebody to shelter and to services, that we know that that's a win.
And 2 things I would add for the benefit of our media in the room. Number one is, on your last report, I noticed it was almost a 1-for-1 men and women at the Rapid Shelter,
It sure has been.
which
so
really,
far.
really surprised me a great deal. Number two, is there, if someone's calling in to dispatch or 911 on a problem homeless situation, should they mention anything about pathways, leave it up to the dispatcher to make the call? I mean, is there a way that we should notify our public that when they're making a call on these type disturbances, that would help you and your team? I mean, I hate to dispatch a policeman and then because I don't know if people understand that when you dispatch a pathways technician, it go with a policeman.
Yes, sir.
So, in other words, is there a way to eliminate the duplication there if our citizens are able to help our dispatchers when they call them in?
So that's a great question. That's one our manager frequently asks. How do we best, define and illustrate this line of communication? So 911 is that first that first step, and it can be regular 911 or it can be the non-emergency. They're both going to the same place. The dispatchers, they ask a series of questions, about the nature of the call. And the more information a caller can provide, the better. That helps with the decision-making at 911 and the information that they push to the field for us to make decisions. But, so if somebody wants to say, hey, this, we heard of the Pathways unit, and we think this might, be something that they might be able to address, that's not gonna hurt anything. But they'll take that information, and they'll push that out to the supervisors, and they triage that as it comes out. Pathways for somebody that's a homeless situation where you have somebody in mental distress, Pathways would be that first option. But we have a whole roster of officers that are crisis certified, so they can also respond and address the needs. And we have our partnership with the Department of Mental Health and the crisis response team that comes at, when we ask, they'll come out and do the assessment. And now we have staff at the Rapid Shelter that is also working in conjunction with us to come out in the field after hours to address somebody that's in need. So really, we've kind of got multiple ponds we're pulling from, and I think that's what, in my opinion, has caused us to be successful in the last few weeks, especially.
I was just going to add, I'm glad you said that last part. As of yesterday, Director Hepperts has hired 2 case managers and another outreach person for after hours specific. And so they are working together, Director Heppert and Chief, because my question to them is, do you need another outreach person for during the daytime as well to be that force multiplier? But they want to see how this is working, as it seems it's really starting to get a good rhythm. So we're going to see with these additional staff persons on the Rapid Shelter side, Pathways, and then just our officers in general being trained, if
Right.
we're making some good progress.
Yes, ma'am. And keep in mind, we provide every police officer a phone.
Right.
So obviously, we use our radios, but when we're talking with Rapid Shelter staff or DMH folks, I mean, all of our officers, they all have rosters of numbers, and there's just a lot of just immediate direct communication. They can take pictures of a potential client and send it just so they can have some awareness of what, what they're dealing with before they respond. So communication is everything. And I think, so far so good would be.
Let me just say this, Chief and City Manager. The response I'm hearing from the business people in particular that I run into, like yesterday, has been overwhelmingly positive, that people can tell a difference. What your team and your code team did on Forest Drive, I think, has been day and night change there. And I think the fact that we have a place now where after 5 and on the weekends, we can address these chronic unsheltered homeless folks that we couldn't before. I think it's making a big difference in the quality of life. And I think this is what we all have to remember. Historically, we've seen the homeless issues on Main Street in the entertainment districts. They've moved to the suburbs as well, and I think it's really making a difference out there. I'm really proud of you guys and y'all for what you've done.
Thank you.
While we've been here today, Ms. Kellett, and I'm saying this in case she's watching, because we're going to loop back around with Super Harbison, very interested in connecting with some of the same efforts that happened on Forest Drive with Walmart and other regional folks to see what they can do. I think there's a lot of, they're more organized out there now from an association standpoint, and they really are wanting. Okay, good. So they're really wanting to connect the dots, and I think when we talked recently, it was after the chamber breakfast or whatever that was, and we talked about that. So she's reached out, so we need to close the
I would
loop.
say, Ms. Wells, that brings me to my last
Yes,
question,
sir.
which came up yesterday. And this is just something I learned yesterday, just for clarification, if it's something we should change. On urban camping, what I heard yesterday was by statute, we have to verbally warn somebody, then write them a written citation, and then on the third time, take action in incarceration if we have to. And my question, if that's the case, I mean, can we eliminate the verbal warning and just make it a citation and then action? I mean, we've got somebody in the same place. I hate for our officers to have to 3 times make a visit to correct something. If we could do that to 2, I think it might help. And if it takes us with an ordinance to do it, I mean, I would say let's work with Ms.
So
Knott.
we could work with legal to see if there's a way we can streamline that. One of the things that we try to do is give ample notice, to give folks an opportunity to gather their belongings and vacate. And we typically post it, but there may be some things we could do to more,
We could do like a
directly address it.
non-monetary citation, which is basically a written warning.
Right.
And then I just think it might help.
Yes,
make
sir.
things easier. I mean, other than that, really, just again, thank you for what you guys do.
And I just wanted to add that it's incumbent upon council folks such as myself to explain to people who have negative comments without even knowing what the housing is. I think it was here at the last meeting, city council meeting, and a person said to me, "Yeah, it looks like a prison cell," and I said, "Or a dorm room." Whichever, it's how you choose to look at it. And so I have found myself having to explain to people. There's some folks who just want to think it's inhumane and so forth, but I think we have to do a good job too of explaining. And that's the example I use. It's like a dorm room, so that they understand that the living conditions are good, and they're temporary. And all that we are offering versus where some folks were staying. So I just wanted to note that. I've gotten that a couple of times.
Thank you, Chief. Excellent report.
Thank you.
Chief Jenkins, I recognize you in that fancy suit. Seeing him in uniform. Must be preaching today.
Sometimes just gotta be incognito. So, thank you all for this time. I didn't really bring a report like that because I was understanding that you only wanted just the staffing and talk a little bit about the ISO. So that's what I will concentrate on, okay? So basically, we're still trying to recruit people. We got like all efforts going on, and we got everybody out there trying to recruit people. We are getting some applications through the portal. When I checked today, I think we had like 100 applications, and for non-sworn, and probably about close to 30 for sworn. So we're still trying to do that. We basically have a couple of programs. Over this past Friday, I actually swore in 4 new firefighters. They started shift this weekend. Right now, I'm conditionally offering 22 people to start school in January. I conditioned off them last week and going to finish up this week. So we have 22 people. The issue is that since a year, over the past year, we've probably trained about 57, right around 57 firefighters to come on board. We can do that because we do our own academy. The problem is, just since the first year, I've lost about 70 people.
70?
About 70, yes. So currently, we got 57, right around 57 openings for firefighter positions. So although we gain, we still losing. And I think this probably, since I've been here, it's probably been the worst time that I've seen, you know, for us. Right now, we're probably at about a 14% attrition rate, when we should only be around a 3%. And when you're talking about being at 3% attrition, that's because people do retire, and some people just gonna do other things. But when I say there's right around 7 that we lost, that would encompass people that didn't pass the recruit class, people that retired, and then other folks that just looking for something else to do, and seeking other avenues in other departments. So that's kind of where we are on with that. When talking about the ISO, we are, and there are various reasons, and I do want to say this also, we still riding short sometimes. Well, all the time, riding short, because we got to be able to get people in the door in order for us to have those trucks full. We can talk about all the calls we did. I could have brought y'all those stats, how we run everything. When I say everything, I do mean we run active shooters also. You know why? Because we don't want to have to go inside to rescue these folks, get them aid. You know, so we have to do that. That's why we're wearing bulletproof vests now. But anyway, you know, so that is still a problem. Like I say, just losing people, it's really a problem. And it's almost like every week now, I'm getting a resignation letter. It just resignation. Or the other thing is, and I was teasing folks in HR. I said, I'm trying to get people in the door. Y'all still letting people go off on FMLA? But I know people have issues. You know that we just joking about that. It's serious. But anyway, we do have ISO coming in, and I expect them to be in any time between now and the summer. The problem is they're so backed up, and they only got one representative taking care of the whole state. He's very good at what he does. He's very thorough. And so, you know, sometimes they may give you, say, well, we're being, like, we fully expected to have this done prior to the end of this year. But because of the backlog that he has, being the only one doing it for the whole state, so they kind of pushes us back. But he works well with us. I still expect us to maintain a 1 in the city. I expect us to maintain a 2 in the county. However, it's still going to be dependent upon certain things. Our staffing, you know, that plays a major part in it. Our communications, how quickly we can get the call in the port and get dispatched and get on the scene. How quickly we can get X amount of firefighters on the scene. That's important. They judge you on that in a certain amount of time. So when people ask us why we want to ride our trucks short, that is one of the, ride it full. That's one of the reasons, because we got to get X amount of firefighters on the scene within a lot of time to keep that rating. So I'm not all doom and gloom. I will say this, and I thank Ms. Wilson for supporting us. The state has, we're part of a Type 5 team, urban search and rescue team, and we are the host department, which is great. And the reason why we host the department, because we got the state house right here. If anything happened at the state house, collapse or anything, we got to go in there. If anything happened in this region, we get responded to the area to help bring it under control. So what the state did, in the state fire marshal's budget, they allocated $5 million. It's 5 teams in the state. We the Midlands. So they allocated $5 million. So we received $1 million of that dollar. And the good thing about it is the city does not have to put up any upfront money. When we buy equipment, all we do is give the bill to the state fire marshal's office and they write the check. We don't have to spend that money in 1 year. We can carry it over. So just whenever we need the equipment, the only thing is it's got to be available to be able to respond with it. But City of Columbia is the keeper of the equipment, and we keep the equipment, and we can use it for anything that we do on our daily responses. So I'm not going to take long. I just want to bring that out and just say, we're going to keep going at it.
Good
questions?
report, Chief. Mr. Taylor or Tina?
No, we bought some, I think, did I see we were buying a big new ladder truck this year too?
Yeah.
We are, but the problem with trucks now and any equipment is that, it'll be 2.5 years out.
Really?
Oh, yes. That's how the market is right now. Everybody is vying to get equipment right now, and everything is just so backed up.
A lot of that because of like ARPA money and things like that has just created that demand.
Well, yeah, some of it.
Not, the demand was always there.
The
Created
funding.
The ability to purchase, how about that?
Well, it's hard to get parts and all that good stuff. That's why normally when we buy a truck, we try to do a one-shop stop, because we ain't worrying about these folks having to provide this part. They provide this part. We work with one person, one vendor, and then they provide everything. Or if something happens to the truck, we ain't got to send it this place, then we send it that place, one place, and we done. But anyway, I was in a meeting with some fire chiefs, a couple, the metro chiefs from South Carolina, and it's about 15 or 16 of us there, part of the metro, and they all having the same issues about getting equipment in.
How about the bunker gear and stuff where we bought, is that backed up too?
That is, we are right now, because how long it took for us to get to that process, right now we are putting the, not bids, but we are putting the, to put the bids out so we can get the bunker gear in. So that's in process right now. And then we had to wait on the county as well. I know the city allocated money before the county did, but the county has allocated their portion of it, so we're gonna move forward with that. And
Has the county now allocated their portion?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we moving forward, and I want to say that's huge. And we really appreciate it. That's huge because, if you ever been to a fire, you've seen the firefighters come out of the fire with all that insulation, how wet the gear is, and all that good stuff, and then they'll take this with that same bunker gear to another call without it being clean. And see, that is part. And firefighters are getting counsel right now, and that is all part of our council initiative, to make sure we keep our firefighters safe. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief.
I wanted to ask you, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, is there a template you want to follow for both chiefs to present every meeting? And if so, this kind of came up yesterday, so is there specific, or I can work with them on a template, staffing, or
Yeah, I
stats,
think
or
we do
whatever?
need a report at each one of the public safety meetings, and we always want to know about the staffing and,
Crime stats. and
Statistics.
Statistics that are relevant
yeah.
for
So I think we can develop let's work on that, developing a list of questions that they ought to answer each time they come.
Or that in January.
That'd be good. Not gonna meet in December, I don't believe. Yeah. Well, that'll be a separate meeting. Yeah, separate meeting. Any other questions before we go into executive session? Okay, I'm gonna make a motion that we go into executive session for discussion of employment of an employee pursuant to SC Code 30-4-70A1, municipal court judges.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll? Aye.